Imagine a Europe where the phones don't ring in Washington because nobody is picking up. In 2026, that's no longer a what if, it's the reality. We are living in what some observers call the time of monsters, an uncertain era transitioning between an old world that hasn't yet died and a new world yet to be born. By 2026, the foundational assumptions of the post-Cold War era have been shattered. For 80 years, Europe relied on an American security umbrella, but in 2025, that trust has been fractured. With the re-election of Donald Trump, the transatlantic relationship has moved into a low-trust environment, characterized by tactical hostility and strategic unpredictability. From the war in Ukraine to a global trade war and the existential threat of climate change, Europe is facing its gravest hour since the Second World War. Today, we analyze the continental pivot, Europe's desperate bid for strategic autonomy. To survive, Europe must first secure its lifeblood, energy. The 2026 State of the Energy Union report concludes that the EU must evolve into an electro-continent, relying on domestically produced, clean energy. The shift is already happening. Following the end of Russian pipeline gas transit on January 1st, 2025, Europe successfully diversified its sources. It's not just about pipes. It's about a continent powered by the wind of the North Sea and the sun of the Mediterranean, finally cutting the cord of dependency. Norway is now the EU's top gas supplier, and the United States has become the region's main LNG provider. But this has created a new overdependence on US gas. Germany, for instance, relied on US supplies for 95% of its LNG imports during this period. The long-term solution? Electrification. The goal is for electricity's share in final energy consumption to double by 2040. In 2024 alone, the EU installed 77 gigawatts of renewable capacity, and clean energy already accounts for almost half of the electricity mix. Europe is racing to ensure that its green transition also serves its economic security. While energy is about resilience, defense is about survival. As US commitment wanes, the need for an independent European defense force is no longer a pipe dream. It is a survival imperative. This is the Europeanization of NATO, a process where European states assume greater responsibility without fully decoupling from the US. The scale of the challenge is staggering. The International Institute for Strategic Studies estimates the cost of replacing US conventional capabilities in Europe at $1 trillion. That's more than the entire GDP of most nations just to keep the lights on in the defense centers. In March 2025, the European Commission unveiled the Readiness 2030 package, providing financial levers to ramp up spending. This includes the Rearm Europe initiative, a plan to tackle immediate threats through massive investment and joint procurement. We are seeing the rise of EU plus blueprints, expanding frameworks like the Franco-British Combined Joint Expeditionary Force to include non-EU members like the UK, Norway, and Turkey. There are even serious discussions about a European Supreme Allied Commander and an independent nuclear deterrent. Leaders in Germany and Poland have signaled that if Washington is no longer trustworthy, Europe must hold its own nuclear options. On the global stage, Europe must navigate the intensifying rivalry between the US and China. While Washington pushes for decoupling in high-tech sectors, Brussels maintains a policy of de-risking. What does de-risking mean? It means reducing critical dependencies in supply chains, especially for semiconductors and rare minerals, while keeping communication lines open with Beijing. But don't mistake allies for friends. Behind the scenes, a silent war is raging over your smartphone and your data. While we talk about defense and energy, the US and the EU are locked in a low-trust battle for digital supremacy. Washington has recently shifted from diplomatic disagreement to tactical hostility. In a stunning move, US embassies have been instructed to actively counter EU digital regulations. Why? Because the US sees Brussels rules not as consumer protection, but as a coordinated assault on American big tech. This is the paradox of 2025. Europe depends on the US for the missiles that guard its borders, but it is simultaneously fighting a regulatory war against the American tech giants that dominate its digital life. It is a high-stakes game of strategic interdependence, where one wrong move could shatter the transatlantic bond forever. Europe faces a dilemma. It relies on China for the green technologies vital for its energy transition, but depends on the US for its security guarantees. The goal is strategic interdependence, managing global links while building the resilience to resist external coercion. To lead in a multipolar world, the EU must first reform itself. Enlargement is no longer just an economic promise, it is a matter of hard security. We are looking toward a potential European Union 36, adding the Western Balkans and the association trio of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. It is believed that a larger Europe would be a safer Europe, pooling resources for continental defense. However, a union of 36 members cannot function under the unanimity trap. In 2025, single member states have repeatedly delayed sanctions against Russia and aid for Ukraine. The push to expand qualified majority voting is essential for rapid decision-making, yet it faces stiff resistance from countries fearing the loss of national sovereignty. Additionally, the EU's share of global GDP has declined from 25% to 15%, and its productivity growth lags behind both the US and China. Without a competitiveness compass and a unified single market, Europe risks fading into geopolitical irrelevance. Europe's path forward is not a binary choice between East and West. It is a transition toward a hybrid model of strategic interdependence. Success is not guaranteed. It requires 5 to 10 years of peace for military buildup and an unprecedented political consensus across the continent. But the status quo is no longer an option. As Benjamin Franklin once warned, we must all hang together, or, most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. Europe is finally waking up to the reality that it cannot defend democracy on US servers or US subsidies alone. It must become the master of its own destiny. To understand this pivot, think of the European Union as a grand cathedral being renovated during a hurricane. The builders are trying to strengthen the foundations and install new glass, while the winds of global shifts threaten to tear the roof off. They must work faster and more united than ever before. For if the structure fails, there is no shelter left for any of them. Do you think Europe can actually hang together? Or are we watching the slow fracture of the West? Let's discuss in the comments. If you'd like to see more AI-powered breakdowns of geopolitical scenarios similar to the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and catch the next episode.